Lavender, that was always her thing. Evelyn said it helped calm her nerves, made the world feel softer somehow. It became her trademark, the scent that clung to my shirts long after she hugged me goodbye. For years, it was part of who we were. But lately, that scent had changed, stronger, almost sharper, like someone else had picked it out for her. Definitely not the same bottle I bought her last Christmas. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house smelled different, not just lavender anymore, but something that reminded me of rain and lies. There was a wine glass on the counter, lipstick mark half faded, still half full. Evelyn never used to drink alone. From the backyard came the faint sound of music, soft and slow, the kind that carries memories. I followed it quietly. And there she was, barefoot, twirling under the fading light like the world hadn't touched her. Her laughter floated through the air, light and careless. On the table beside her, her phone lit up. For a split second, I caught the message, same place tomorrow. Then the screen dimmed. She didn't see me. I just stood there, watching, caught between disbelief and heartbreak. For a brief moment, I almost convinced myself she was still mine, the same graceful, beautiful woman I fell in love with. But then that familiar lavender hit me again, and I realized it wasn't my gift anymore. I didn't say a word that night. I just stood there, hidden in the doorway, watching her move like nothing in the world could touch her. The sun was dipping low, painting her hair gold, and for a second, I almost forgot why I felt that ache in my chest. She looked free, lighter than I'd seen her in years. I used to make her laugh like that once. Now, it belonged to someone else, some stranger who had managed to slip into the cracks of our marriage. I could feel it in the air, that quiet, invisible line between what used to be ours and what had already been taken. When she finally noticed me, it wasn't the soft smile I remembered. She froze for half a heartbeat, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it with that careful calm she'd perfected lately. "You're home early," she said, her voice steady but her eyes searching mine. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a small smile. Traffic was light. I didn't mention the message. I didn't ask who she'd been talking to. I just walked past her, pretending I didn't see the truth glowing on that phone screen. But the air between us had changed, thicker, colder, and the silence that followed said more than either of us could. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. Every sound seemed louder, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the hallway floor, even the soft clink of her wine glass when she set it down. We used to fill these rooms with conversation, with laughter, with plans for the weekend. Now, it was like living beside a ghost who still knew how to smile. Evelyn sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice I was watching her. I poured myself a drink, not because I wanted one, but because silence needed something to hold on to. "How was work?" she asked finally, eyes never leaving the screen. "Busy," I said. "Yours?" She hesitated for just a second. "Same as always." Then she looked up, gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and went back to pretending everything was fine. I wanted to ask her who he was, the man behind that message, the one who made her laugh again. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat across from her, tracing the rim of my glass and wondering when we'd started living separate lives under the same roof. As she stood to head upstairs, the scent of that unfamiliar lavender trailed behind her, soft and haunting. It lingered long after she was gone, like a reminder that I was slowly losing her, one quiet night at a time. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing beside me. She looked peaceful, like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't shake the thought that she wasn't mine anymore, not really. At some point, curiosity turned into something darker, a need for proof. I told myself it was just to clear my mind, to silence the doubts eating me alive. So, when her alarm went off and she headed to the shower, I reached for her phone. My hands shook as I picked it up, the screen lighting up like it knew I shouldn't be doing this. There it was, same place tomorrow. The message was gone now, deleted. But the chat thread was still there, under a contact saved only as E. No picture, no last name. Just one letter, like a secret carved into glass. The messages were ordinary on the surface: hope your meeting went well, drive safe, same time next week. But between the lines, I could feel it, the warmth, the care, the kind of tone you use when someone means more than they should. When she came back into the room, I quickly put the phone down and pretended to scroll through mine. She smiled faintly, wrapped her hair in a towel, and kissed me on the forehead before heading downstairs. That kiss felt different too, soft, practiced, hollow. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank lock screen of her phone, wondering when I'd stopped being the person she texted just to say she missed me. The next morning, Evelyn left earlier than usual. She said she had a client breakfast, something about a last-minute meeting downtown. I nodded, pretending to believe her, even helped her find her keys. But the whole time, that voice in my head wouldn't shut up: check, just once, and you'll know. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I grabbed my jacket and followed. I kept a few cars behind, far enough not to be noticed. The sky was pale and gray, and my stomach twisted with every turn she made. I hated myself for doing it, but I hated not knowing even more. She drove past her office, didn't even slow down, and headed toward the River District, the part of town filled with little cafes and art studios. I parked down the street and watched her pull into a small lot beside a gallery. She stepped out, brushed her hair back, and smiled, that smile. The one she used to give me when life still felt simple. A man was already waiting by the entrance. Tall, a little older than me, wearing a charcoal coat. He greeted her like they'd known each other for years, his hand resting lightly on her back as they walked inside. That simple touch made my chest tighten like a fist. I stayed in the car, watching through the rain-specked windshield as they disappeared into the gallery. The sign above the door read, "The Loft." I'd driven past it 100 times, never knowing it was where my marriage would start to crumble. When she finally came out an hour later, her laugh reached me even through the glass. And right then, I knew, the lavender wasn't just a scent anymore. It was a trail leading me straight to the truth. I didn't confront her that day. I wish I had, just stormed into that gallery and demanded the truth right then. But I didn't. Instead, I drove home, parked in the driveway, and sat there for almost 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. When she walked through the door later that afternoon, she looked radiant. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright, not tired like after a long day at work, but alive, almost glowing. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, that casual, practiced gesture that now felt like an apology wrapped in routine. "How was the meeting?" I asked, keeping my tone easy. "Good," she said, hanging up her coat. "Long, draining. You know how clients can be." I nodded, smiling like a fool. "Yeah, I know. We had dinner together, like nothing had changed." She talked about the weather, about her sister's new baby, about how she wanted to repaint the guest room. And I listened, really listened, wondering how someone could sound so normal while living a double life. Later that night, while she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, I caught a glimpse of her reflection, calm, beautiful, unreachable. I wanted to ask, "Who were you with today?" But instead, I said, "You changed your perfume again." She met my eyes in the mirror, just for a second. "You noticed?" "Yeah," I said softly. "It's different." She smiled faintly. "It's just something new I found. Thought I'd try it for a while." Then she turned off the light and slipped into bed, curling away from me like she always did now. The space between us felt colder than ever, like a wall I couldn't climb anymore. I lay there, staring into the dark, my mind replaying that man's hand on her back, her laughter echoing through the glass. I started imagining everything, their conversations, their meetings, the secret moments I'd never see. That night I learned something cruel about myself. The human heart can survive on denial for a long time, but once it tastes suspicion, it starves for the truth. The next few days were a blur of routine and performance. I went to work, came home, laughed at the right moments, and pretended to be the same man I'd always been. But inside, something had cracked, a small, sharp break that wouldn't stop widening. Evelyn was different now, too. Not in obvious ways. She still cooked dinner, still asked about my day, still smiled when I came home. But there was something about her tone, something too careful, like every word had been rehearsed. It wasn't warmth anymore, it was strategy. I started paying attention to the details. The little things she thought I'd never notice. Her perfume bottle, half empty even though she'd just bought it. The late-night emails she typed with her phone screen tilted away from me. The way she'd flinch when I walked into the room too quietly. Every piece fit together like a puzzle I didn't want to finish. One Thursday, I checked her car. Not proud of it, but curiosity had become survival. In the glove box, tucked beneath an old map, I found a crumpled receipt. The Loft Café. 2 lattes, 1 slice of cheesecake, 1 rose. Dated the same morning she said she had a dental appointment. I stared at that slip of paper for a long time, feeling my pulse drum in my throat. Proof. Not enough to destroy her story, but enough to burn a hole through mine. That night, she came home humming, her hair still smelling like lavender and rain. I held up the receipt and asked, quietly, "You went to the loft today?" Her smile faltered for half a second, a tiny flicker of panic, then returned, steady and smooth. "Oh, yeah," she said casually. I stopped there after the dentist. Needed some caffeine. Why? I shrugged. No reason. She studied me for a moment, searching for something in my face. When she didn't find it, she leaned in, kissed me softly, and whispered, "You worry too much." After she went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at that little piece of paper. It looked harmless, just ink and numbers, but to me, it felt like the start of an avalanche. I realized something then. I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. The truth was already chasing me, and sooner or later, it was going to catch up. I started seeing her differently after that night, not as my wife, not as the woman who shared my home, but as someone living a life parallel to mine. She was right there beside me, breathing the same air, eating the same meals, yet miles away in every other way that mattered. Days blurred into each other, filled with small betrayals disguised as normal life. Her laughter on the phone that wasn't meant for me. The way she dressed a little nicer on client days. The subtle rush in her tone when she said she'd be late. None of it was loud enough to be proof, but all of it screamed in silence. I became an observer in my own marriage, a quiet detective of small things. The faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine on her coat. The credit card charge from a boutique I'd never heard of. The soft humming she did in the mornings, the kind that sounded like happiness trying to stay hidden. One Friday evening, I told her I might have to work late, just to see what she'd do. She didn't hesitate, smiled even, and said she might go out for dinner with some coworkers. That was all I needed to hear. As she left, I followed. Again. But this time, I didn't keep my distance. I parked across the street, close enough to see her reflection in the glass as she entered that same café, the Loft. He was already there. Same man, same warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. He reached for her hand across the table, and she didn't pull away. She smiled, that soft, genuine smile I hadn't seen in years, the kind that comes from comfort, not guilt. For a moment, I couldn't move. My whole world felt like it was underwater, sounds muffled, movement slow. Watching her laugh with another man was like watching a memory being rewritten in real time. Everything I thought we were dissolved in front of me. I waited until she left before I drove home. I sat in the driveway again, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was a strange calm instead, the kind that comes when pain finally stops being a question and becomes an answer. When she came home later, she acted like nothing happened. Kicked off her shoes, poured a glass of wine, asked me about my day. I watched her, the woman I once promised forever to, and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was knowing she could look me in the eyes and lie so beautifully. The thing about pretending is that it becomes addictive. Once you start, it's hard to stop. Every day after that café, I woke up and put on the same mask, smiled when I had to, laughed when it was expected, and played the part of the man who didn't know his world was burning. But beneath all that quiet acting, something in me was changing. I started keeping track of her little lies. Not because I wanted to expose her, not yet, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. I wrote down the dates, the times, the places she said she'd been. Client dinner. Office late. Sister's birthday. I checked them all. And every time, the details fell apart under the weight of truth. She'd always been good with stories, my Evelyn. The way she told them, you wanted to believe every word. But now, every sentence she spoke sounded rehearsed, stripped of warmth. Her eyes, once so easy to read, had turned into mirrors, reflecting only what she wanted me to see. One night, I called my brother Mark. I hadn't talked to him in weeks. He could hear it in my voice before I even said a word. "What's wrong, man?" he asked. I hesitated. "I think she's seeing someone." Silence. Then, softly, "You sure?" "I saw her," I said. "I followed her. It's not just in my head anymore." Mark sighed, that long, heavy kind of sigh that carries both sympathy and helplessness. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to walk away. Part of me wants to hear her say it out loud. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "Whatever happens, don't lose yourself in her lies." After we hung up, I sat alone in the dark for a long time. I thought about every version of her I'd loved, the one who stayed up with me on cold nights, who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who promised forever under a rainstorm. But the woman sleeping upstairs wasn't that person anymore. And I realized, if I didn't confront her soon, she'd rewrite the whole story. And I'd be left as a character in her version of the truth. It was a Saturday, quiet, unassuming, the kind of evening that hides the worst moments behind a calm sky. Evelyn said she was going out again, something about meeting a client for dinner. I nodded, just like always, but this time I was ready. I'd been planning this for a week. Not out of anger, not entirely, anyway, but because I needed the truth, raw and undeniable. I'd had enough of guessing. Enough of pretending not to know. She left the house dressed in that soft cream coat I'd bought her 2 winters ago, hair loose around her shoulders, lips painted the same shade of red she used to wear for me. I watched from the window as she walked to her car, my chest tightening with every step she took away from me. When the taillights disappeared down the road, I followed, slower this time, more careful than before. The city was half asleep, lights glowing in soft amber tones, rain beginning to mist across the windshield. I drove through streets we used to walk hand in hand, now haunted by her absence. She ended up at the loft again, of course she did. But tonight felt different. I parked across the street, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. Through the glass, I saw her sitting at the same corner table. And then he appeared, the man in the charcoal coat. He leaned in, smiling in that easy, familiar way people do when they know they're wanted. She reached across the table, resting her hand over his. I watched her lips move, soft, deliberate, as she laughed at something he said. That laugh used to be mine. For a long time, I just sat there, staring. The world outside that cafe window blurred into streaks of rain and neon, but they stayed sharp, vivid, alive. My heart felt like it was splitting in slow motion, every beat a reminder that this wasn't a nightmare. It was real. I don't even remember getting out of the car, but suddenly I was standing outside the cafe door, the bell jingling as I walked in. Heads turned, but I only saw her. She froze mid-laugh. Her eyes widened, lips parting, the color draining from her face. "Daniel," she whispered, like my name had become something foreign. The man beside her straightened up, confused, glancing between us. "Evelyn, you know him?" I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, she does. I'm her husband." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The man shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath before standing up and walking away, fast, like guilt had weight. Evelyn reached for me, voice trembling. "Daniel, please." I took a step back. "Don't. Not now. You don't get to touch me and lie in the same breath." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, I saw the woman I once loved, scared, fragile, human. "It's not what you think," she whispered. I shook my head. "You've said that before. The problem is, now I know exactly what to think." The rain outside had turned heavier, blurring the lights beyond the glass. She looked down, then up at me again, desperate for something to hold on to. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that comes right before the storm breaks. "Neither did I," said quietly. "But here we are." And just like that, everything we'd built, the years, the memories, the laughter, cracked open between us. I turned and walked out, not because I wanted to end it, but because I finally understood, sometimes the cruelest part of love isn't losing someone. It's realizing they were never really yours to begin with. I don't remember the drive home. It was like my body was on autopilot while my mind stayed back at that cafe, frozen in the moment she said my name like it didn't belong to her anymore. The rain followed me the whole way, heavy, relentless, pounding against the windshield like it was trying to wash away what I'd seen. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. The lights in the windows used to mean comfort, safety, warmth. Now they looked like lies wearing a disguise. I sat there for a while, the engine idling, trying to gather the courage to step back into what used to be our home. It wasn't long before I heard the crunch of tires behind me. Evelyn's car. She pulled up slowly, headlights cutting through the rain, and for a second, I almost drove off. I didn't want to hear her explanations. I didn't want to see her eyes searching for forgiveness I couldn't give. But I didn't move. She came inside a few minutes later, soaked, her hair clinging to her face. She looked small, fragile even, like a storm had torn through her too. "Daniel," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "please, can we just talk?" I stood by the counter, arms crossed, staring at her like she was a stranger who happened to know my secrets. "Talk? That's funny. You had months to talk." She winced. "I didn't plan this. It just happened." "That's what people say when they've already decided to betray you," I said. My voice was low, steady, but every word felt like glass in my throat. Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Then why did you?" She took a deep breath, trembling. "Because I felt invisible, Daniel. You were always somewhere else, work, your own thoughts, your routines. I was here, trying to reach you, and you never noticed. And then someone did." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to shout, to remind her of all the nights I stayed up worrying about her, all the times I tried to make things right. But in a way, she wasn't wrong, I had drifted too, just slower. Still, that didn't excuse it. Love is supposed to be repair, not replacement. "So you found someone to make you feel alive again," I said quietly. "And you decided I wasn't enough." She stepped closer, tears spilling down her face. "It wasn't about being enough. I just forgot how to be happy with you. Her honesty was brutal, the kind that doesn't comfort, just cuts deeper. I looked at her, the woman I'd built my life with, and realized she was confessing not out of guilt, but exhaustion. The silence that followed was unbearable. The kind that tells you the story's over, but the pain hasn't caught up yet. I walked past her, heading toward the door. I need air, I muttered. Please don't go, she whispered. I paused, hand on the doorknob. You already did. Then I stepped outside into the rain, letting it soak me completely. It felt cleaner out there, real. Inside that house, everything had turned into half-truths and excuses. But out here, it was just me, the cold, and the kind of quiet that only comes after you've finally stopped pretending. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew that whatever version of us existed before that night, it was gone for good. The morning after everything fell apart was quieter than death. No shouting, no tears, no apologies that could stitch the night back together, just silence, thick and heavy, stretching across every corner of the house. Evelyn made coffee like she always did. Same routine. Same rhythm. But her hands shook when she poured it, and she couldn't meet my eyes. The lavender scent still lingered in the air, but it smelled different now, tainted somehow, like the ghost of something once beautiful. I sat across from her at the table, staring at the small crack in my mug that I'd never noticed before. Funny how you can live with something for years and never really see it until it's broken. She finally spoke. I didn't sleep, she said softly. Yeah, I replied. Me neither. We stayed like that for a while, two people who once knew everything about each other, now strangers in the same kitchen. I thought about asking her what came next. Were we supposed to pretend again? Try to fix it? Or just quietly fade out, like a song that had played too long? But every word felt pointless. The damage was already done. Later that day, she left for work. Or at least, that's what she said. I didn't follow her this time. What was the point? I already knew where she went when she didn't come home right away. I just didn't care anymore. The house felt emptier without her, but it also felt honest for the first time in months. No more fake laughter. No more lies hidden behind soft smiles. Just truth, raw, unfiltered, painful truth. That night, I sat on the back porch with a bottle of whiskey and tried to remember when things started to go wrong. Maybe it wasn't one big moment. Maybe it was 1,000 tiny ones, missed dinners, tired excuses, small silences that grew into walls. Love doesn't usually explode, it erodes, slowly, until you're standing in the ruins wondering when the last brick fell. Evelyn came home late. I heard her key in the lock, her hesitant footsteps on the floor. She stopped in the doorway, watching me from a distance. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying somewhere else, not for me, but for herself. Daniel, she whispered, I don't know how to fix this. I didn't look at her. Maybe it's not supposed to be fixed. She sat down beside me, close enough that I could feel her warmth, but not close enough to touch. I still love you, she said, barely audible. I took a long breath. Maybe you do, I said quietly, but not the way you used to. We stayed there for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees. Two people sitting in the aftermath of something that once meant everything. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't before: sometimes love doesn't die because it runs out. Sometimes it dies because you finally see it for what it's become. A week passed before either of us said the word divorce. Not because it hadn't crossed our minds, but because saying it out loud would have made it real. In those quiet mornings that followed, we moved around the house like polite strangers, careful not to touch, not to speak too much, not to wake whatever fragile piece still lingered. I started sleeping in the guest room. The first night felt strange, the second emptier, and by the third, it almost felt normal. Evelyn didn't argue. Maybe she understood that some distances can't be crossed twice. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, standing in the hallway, eyes filled with something between regret and surrender. She looked like someone who finally realized that apologies can't rebuild what honesty already destroyed. One evening, I found her sitting in the backyard, the same spot where I'd once watched her dance barefoot in the fading light. The same scent of lavender hung in the air, faint and almost gone now. She turned when she heard me. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate you. But I can't love you the same way anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, as if she'd been expecting that answer all along. "I wish I could go back," she whispered. "Yeah," I said softly. "Me too. But we're not the same people we were back then." We sat in silence, both staring at the sky turning orange and gray. The wind carried that faint floral scent again, but this time it didn't sting. It was just a memory passing through. In the days that followed, I packed a few things: clothes, books, the watch she gave me on our 5th anniversary. I didn't take everything. Some things didn't belong to me anymore. Before I left, I stood in the doorway one last time. The house looked smaller, quieter, as if it was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Evelyn stood by the window, not crying, just watching. I gave her a small nod, not forgiveness, not goodbye, just understanding. Driving away, I rolled the window down. The air felt cleaner than it had in months. Somewhere in the distance, I could smell lavender again, faint, softer than before. It didn't remind me of her this time. It reminded me of what comes after: peace. Because maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the scent of what broke you, but learning to breathe again without flinching when it passes by. And for the first time in a long time, I did.